I'm just back about 2 hours ago from another source of convening power, and this was at Harvard and MIT. These are 150 presidents, provosts, and people with my job across America from 50 universities, all gathering in Cambridge to talk about the future of online education. And there were these jokes kind of write themselves, like why do people talk about online education need to meet, et cetera. But the idea is that you really do need to meet. And that's going to be a theme of everything I talk to you about today. So a lot of people are talking about online education, and you should all know who this is. If you know who he is, just raise your hand. All right? Everybody should know who he is, and he is changing the world. This is Sal Khan. So some of the stats you know, it's been less than 9 years since his first tutoring lesson for his cousin via YouTube, and in less than 4 years, he's had 3,800 lessons and 238 million views, and those numbers are probably out of date already. And he is really changing the world, and I'm very excited to see what he'll do. And if you have nieces, nephews, children, cousins, grandchildren who are between 5th grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and going up to college, they know Khan Academy because that's the voice that they're hearing, him and others now, it's a big company, and how they're kind of thinking about education. But there's a lot, as I said, going on about education, including this particular piece that Tom Friedman wrote. It was a breathless piece by Tom Friedman. And it was about MOOCs, and it ran on January 26th. And basically, he said that MOOCs are really important and that the world is really flat. It's flatter than it was 10 years ago when he wrote The World is Flat. And then he said this: nothing has more potential to lift more people out of poverty than MOOCs. And you all know what MOOCs are now, right? Massive open online courses. And I thought, really, Tom? What about like clean air, clean water? Is this what's going to get people out of poverty? Electricity? But it turns out he's directionally right, that the education industry is going to be disrupted, and there's a lot of changes going to come. Tom is actually at that conference and making the final remarks now as I speak here. But what happened is when this piece ran, people from all over campus started emailing me saying, why aren't we doing more of this? And then others saying, we should never do this. And that's also what happens. Kind of, if you want attention, be careful what you wish for. I also learned that a lot of people are talking about kind of education and technology. And I love this quote from Thomas Edison in 1922. He said that the motion pictures will revolutionize education, and we won't need textbooks anymore because everyone will watch movies. What does that sound like? It sounds like MOOCs, right? But one of the things that I have learned is that people have been thinking about education. It's not a new thing. And if you can think back to 1922, this happened. What am I working on as CDO, trying to figure out what's going on here? I'm cataloging all the initiatives that are happening at Columbia. There's been things going on here for 2 decades, and I'm trying to help coordinate the various efforts, and I'm trying to share what's working and what's not working. Those of you from Columbia know it's a very decentralized place, and we have to think about it in kind of new ways. And what I've put together is a reading list of online learning, and I encourage you to steal it and use it in any way you like. I update it every week almost, and the address is here, bit.ly/onlineedreadings. And you can take a look at that, and I think that'll give you a sense of some of the things that are happening here. There's some principles of online learning that we want to think about at Columbia. You may not know this, but Columbia was involved in online learning at the turn of the century, and was involved in a project called Fathom, which was a very big effort. Tens of millions of dollars were spent, but it didn't work out because it was way ahead of its time. So this time we're saying we're going to be thoughtful, strategic, sustainable. We're going to be in keeping with Columbia's brand, and we're going to be keeping with Columbia's strengths. One of the professors, when I said this to, got upset and said, you cannot use the word brand. We're not a business. And I said, would you be more comfortable using the word reputation? He said, okay, maybe. But I also had news for this professor. If we're charging, $50,000 a year for education, that's a business. We're not sitting under a tree and just kind of talking to our students. This is a business, and for better or worse. And I love this line from Professor Hitendra Wadhwa, who many of you know teaches an online class at the B School, at our B School. Inspire, not just inform. That's his goal, and I think that's a great goal for everything we do online. one of the things that we've been thinking about is our efforts in this space are meant to supplement and enhance what we do in the classroom, and are going to be built around the ideas and processes we already have at Columbia, and we want to kind of improve learning at Columbia. Now there are 3 targets for online learning: on-campus students, non-resident students who are in hybrid courses, and then kind of these unconnected students, unconnected to the world. MOOCs get the most buzz, but there's much more to online ed than MOOCs. If looking at this, my goal is to spend 20% of my day thinking about MOOCs, but I end up spending 90% of the day talking about MOOCs, and 100% of the journalist phone calls are about MOOCs, because that's the thing that people want to talk about now. Another term that you should be familiar with as you go forward is this idea of the flipped classroom. And this is a screenshot I pulled of Khan Academy, and I did that on purpose. Khan Academy started as calculus, and there's a lot of science on there. But here, what you see is Bernini's David. And it's a wonderful piece of video to kind of understand what's going on in trying to understand this idea of flipped classrooms. And I thought, if you haven't seen it, you should take a look. And as I said, 3,800 topics are on there. There are 3 options for MOOCs today: Udacity, edX, and Coursera. And these are all growing, and now they're doing them in overseas countries and overseas universities in native languages that are not English. And I think that's pretty exciting. One of the things that we've been saying for a long time, or at least since I took this job, is that this is going to help us with on-campus learning, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And you can see other things it does: generate prospective student leads, as well as training opportunities for alumni, and I know there are a lot of alumni in the room who really care about that. I want to share this slide. I don't know how clearly you can see it, but this is Professor Wenslaff, David Wenslaff at Princeton, and he taught 49,000. He's used to teaching 10 students in his Princeton class. He had 49,000 students. And one of the things he said is that the internet is a whiny place. In a class of 10, David, we might have 1 whiny student. Now multiply that by 49,000, and you get a sense of what the potential danger is. And he said something that's going to be very important to all of us as we're thinking about this. He didn't say that this took some of his time or most of his time. It said it took all of his time to prep for this and to do this. But he liked it enough that he is doing it again. So we have launched 3 courses at Columbia: a financial engineering class, a class on transistors, and natural language processing, all top professors here. And we had 11,000 signups in less than a week, and now we've crossed 100,000 students on that. And it's just been a couple of weeks since we started. We have this Provost Faculty Advisory Committee on online learning, which is going to look at these issues. There are many others, including how do we deal with intellectual property and the assessment of the learning. Of people actually learning is something that we have to think about. Another thing that we have learned is that online education is all about teaching, but the university's entire reward system is built on research and not teaching necessarily. And so how does that work is something that we have to think about. And then who's going to pay for all this? And this is what I call a naming opportunity, people. So if anybody wants to get involved in behind this, come talk to me. We're going to need a lot of resources to make this happen. I do want to say that I've been saying since June that this is all going to help our actual students on campus. And I can reveal to you our first actual innovation that has happened, even though the courses only started last week, from this MOOC. And that innovation is that the professors released 2 weeks of material online in advance. Think about yourself as a student when you were thinking of shopping for classes and finding things. If the professor had to release not 2 weeks, maybe even 1 week, maybe even 1 hour, it's sometimes hard to get professors to give them the syllabus in advance. Imagine if every professor's video of the first hour, because students want to know what level, how does this work, how does the teacher's style, mannerisms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That 1 hour would reduce all the confusion around the period of shopping, and so I think that's important. So that's just a tiny example of something that we are trying to do now. And then finally, I have this extreme motivation to get it right. Those are my 9-year-old twins, but this was about 5 years ago. and that's in beautiful Kerala, which some of you know is a beautiful part of India, my parents' home state. And my daughter, around the time of this photograph, saw this ad on TV. And some of you may have seen there are these very cheap ads on TV about going to college online. And my then 5-year-old daughter said to me, "Dad, I'm going to go to online college so I don't have to leave you when you're old." And it was just so wonderful. And, you know, already, by the way, she's kind of trying to inch away from that, and she's going back on that. But from that day, I've been thinking about this, you know. Are there ways in which that we could get this online education right? Not that because I want to keep her at home and not have her go to college, because I am a great believer in the magic that happens in a classroom, the magic that happens in a room like this, though there's very little magic happening at the moment. But the connections you make and everything else. I want her to go to college, and if she's lucky enough and smart enough to get into Columbia, that'd be great. But getting this right is especially important to me as they are going through this. They're going to live this in the next 8 years before they go to college. And then finally, I'm showing this picture, not only because I love showing Kerala, but if you look here, this was the last photograph I had that has a particular artifact from the 20th century. Can you all see what that is? That's a date here at the bottom like this, right? We will never have that again. There's probably an Instagram filter that fakes that on there, but this is real. And all of this is real, and it's going to work because we're all going to learn together, and we want to make it work. Thanks very much, everybody.